tonight we're thrilled to have the first ever women's boat building panel. We're so excited to host such an important conversation. Women make up about 2.5% of the maritime workforce and only 2% of shipwrights. I couldn't think of a more thoughtful, experienced, or better person to have guest host this important show than Kaci Cronkhite. Kaci is an international author and consultant, former Wooden Boat Festival director, wooden boat owner employing women in shipwrights and trades. She has been a worldwide advocate for women and girls' competence at all levels in the maritime industry, and her award-winning book, Finding Pax, is available in our chandlery. Thank you, Kaci. I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks, Barb. Thanks for all you do and all that you all do there at the Northwest Maritime Center to keep bringing us together in these unique ways, all of us with wooden boats. I want to start this evening by just reflecting for a second on Port Townsend. Port Townsend has long been a magnet for women boat owners, women captains, women in the marine trades, and women in nonprofit maritime education. What makes this panel so special tonight is that the three women who are on the panel are also boat builders. They are shipwrights who've designed, built, and completed major restorations on wooden boats, large and small. I'm thrilled to introduce shipwrights Diana Talley, wave at him, Diana, Julia Maynard, and Esther Whitmore. Together, they represent nearly 100 years of boat building experience and could fill a year's worth of evenings with their stories, but we've only got an hour and a half, so we'll get going. I want to start by talking about both Julia and Diana built and sailed and designed their own small boats and large boats. They designed and built boats alone, and they also built them with husbands. Both of them went on to own their own boat shops. Diana had the smallest boat shop in Port Townsend. It's Port Townsend's boat yard or Boathaven Marina or Boathaven Shipyard. And Julia was a co-owner of one of the two largest boat shops in town. Esther Whitmore is a farm girl and fiddler who fell in love with tall ships. And on a winter of work on the Hudson River with the sloop Clearwater, sparked an interest in building. After a stint on schooner Adventurous, she started doing that full time and is now had nearly 10 years. In fact, she's working right now down at Haven Boatyard in Port Townsend and at Haven Boat Works. And you can see the boat that she's working on as lead shipwright behind her. We're going to talk about some different topics tonight, and you all can ask questions in the chat, as Barb mentioned, and we'll hold place for those at the end. I want to start by asking each of you about becoming a shipwright, how you became a shipwright. Diana, how, as a Seattle kid, the only daughter of 4 kids in the family, what brought you to boats, and how did you become a builder?
Thanks, Kaci. Yeah, I grew up in Seattle, and I actually lived on Lake Washington for several years, and I never, ever even saw boats. They weren't part of my view up here. And I was probably in my very early 20s. I was living in San Francisco and was invited to move to Sausalito on the waterfront, which was amazing. And that was when I first saw boats. I went, oh my gosh, look at that, there's boats. And the way I discovered boat building was I was just walking around my neighborhood one day, and there was a door open to a shop. And I poked my head in and saw this probably 18, 20-foot Sid skiff in frame. And I had never seen a boat under construction, let alone a boat of that quality and beauty. And I just, it was just mind expanding for me. I just went, oh my gosh, I have to learn how to do this. And of course, I didn't have any other plans, and it just consumed me. And then So I stuck with it. It took me several years to put myself in a situation where I could actually really learn and grow into it. But that was my moment of inspiration.
That happens to be, for those of you who know Ray Speck, that was Ray Speck's boat shop, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. We're still friends.
Yeah, what a circle. Julia, your journey is really different. You were in New York and it included schooling. So how'd you come west?
Well, that's a long story, but when I started at Evergreen State College, I was in a marine studies and crafts program, and that basically my interest had been more in marine biology and marine history. But then I found part of the program was designing and building a large craft for the school. And so I basically am an accidental boat builder.
Oh, wow.
And I found myself very intrigued with the crafting end of it. And it in very short order became quite a passion for me. And I looked everywhere for any volunteering projects that I could work on just to learn the craft. And I got told by the guy that was the lead boat builder there, was a guy named Hank Long, and I was cutting the rabbet in the stem, and he said, you know, if you keep going, you're going to be a boat builder.
Wow.
And that was quite an introduction. I was hooked.
Wow.
Good support.
Did you learn is that where you learned lofting, and is that what then led you to the Mystic Seaport internship with John Gardner, or how?
Yes, but it was actually, there's an interesting story to that, because that first boat project, which happened at Evergreen, there was a terrible fire in the shop, which actually burnt the boat, burnt the shop and everything. And so a couple of years later, or a number of us got together and raised the funds for the school to make that program happen again. And that's really where I got into lofting and drawing and more construction at that point in time. Though the person that taught the yacht design section of that program was Bob Perry, who at the time was not a famous yacht designer, but I realized, it was such easy logic for me, and I just picked up how all the different views went together, and I picked it up. And I remember him commenting, "Boy, you figured that out, didn't you?" And I kind of had figured it out on my own. And it was just an interesting, weird thing. It was just something I enjoyed doing.
Yeah, it came natural to you.
Yeah, it did. It was logic, and I enjoyed that. It was solid geometry. I enjoyed mathematics in school, so I guess that's that's what led to that.
And you did a time at Mystic Seaport, right? And then we're back, and then came back this way.
Yes, and actually there were a number of programs at Evergreen that ran boat projects, but there was another one after that where we built 4 pilot gigs, which was and we used them. But then I ended up at Mystic Seaport. John Gardner had invited me to come as an apprentice lines taker. And basically part of that was I would pull the lines off of boats, and then I would loft them out full size, and then I would scale them down into drawings. And initially that was what my job was, but he wanted to keep me on, so he had me pull the lines off a Nevins tender that had been on the schooner Brilliant, make a model, and then loft it out again and build it. And because Brilliant needed a new tender. So that was my job for the second chunk of time that I was there.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very interesting. And I helped him with his boat building. Oh, that was the other thing. I did all the prep work for his boat building classes that he had, which he did every evening. He was 75 years old, and I've never seen anybody with that much energy.
Inspiration.
Yeah.
Well, Esther, you had a whole nother track. You were in tall ships. How did you, what happened on that winter, that experience with Clearwater and Adventurous that led you to where you are now with what's behind you?
Yeah, so I spent a year working on the sloop Clearwater over in New York. And the winter that I was there, they were doing a lot of structural repairs, planking and framing for about a third of the boat. And I hadn't done much with carpentry at that point, but the two shipwrights, Jim and Peter Cricker, that were working that winter with us, I was able to learn kind of some basics about using tools from them, and get some basic carpentry skills and learn a little bit about boat building, and that sort of piqued my interest. And then I guess over the years, I've just kind of dabbled in it on and off during winter yard periods, that kind of thing. When I was working on Adventurous, we were doing a winter maintenance period one year where she came in and did part of her hull, one side of her hull rebuild. And I came on with Haven as an apprentice that winter. And that's where I started picking up more about shipwriting and found that it was something I enjoyed and was interested in learning more about and continuing to do. I've always sort of enjoyed fixing things and building things, even since I was a kid. So every time I had an opportunity to learn something about that side of things, I took it, asked people questions or asked them to show me how to do what they were doing, that sort of thing.
Do you all have a favorite part of boat building? Is there a favorite part of that project behind you that you're doing now? I know you've done a new stem on that boat.
Yeah.
Framing, planking.
The stem was fun. This is the first stem I've done on my own, and I was just thinking the other day about how I've done them with people before, and I remember thinking, oh man, this is so complicated. I'm never going to be able to remember how to do it. But then stuff came back to me when I was doing this one, and so that's I surprised myself there. But yeah, that's fun. I think for me, the thing I like most about it is just the spatial problem solving. Like Julia was saying, the geometry. I like the whole process of taking a pattern and then turning it into a 3D shape.
Well, I was down there the other day and I saw your work when it was still on the workbench, and I thought, wow, so beautiful. Great work. What about you two, Julia, Diana? Do you have a favorite part of boat building?
Yeah, just thinking about it, there's so many things are my favorite part, but I think what really is my favorite part is that every day is different. Every single day is different. There's not a single day that is the same as the day before. And to me, it's so much variety and learning new things all the time and trying to remember them for next time. And to me, that's my favorite part of the whole process, is the novelty and newness every day.
Yeah, and I think for me, I agree with Esther. It's problem solving that, and it's a constant. There's never a point where you're not. Things can move along, but it's and you kind of get into a rhythm if you're planking. But it's, in most parts of it, once you're done with planking, you're onto something else, and it can be very different.
Right.
There's everything. You have a chance to learn everything. Working in a boatyard, you might learn to wire things, plumb things, whatever.
Install engines.
Yes, exactly.
You guys touched on it a little bit, and the next topic I wanted to sort of explore with you is, I just called it tools, muscles, and math. When girls think about careers, work, choices, they might not think of boat building, Thankfully, there are programs like the Girls Boat Building Project here, which is full. I heard yesterday down at the Maritime Center, but a lot of us didn't think about that choice when we were little. And then I think as people drive through the boatyard, one of the things that intimidates people is the tools and jargon, the physicality, and then the math. You all mentioned math. Were you all good at math as kids?
You know, it was just an interest, I guess.
I was good at it too. In university, I that was when I was my best, and geometry, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What about you, Esther?
I was never really great at math. I wasn't bad at it, but mostly I was just slow at it, algebra especially. I never got very advanced in math, but I always loved geometry more than
Oh.
anything else. I still find geometry really fascinating,
Yeah.
which that ties in, with a lot of the work that I do here. That's probably the most useful thing is geometry. And then, basic algebra is useful. I think no matter what you do in general, it can be pretty useful. But yeah, the geometry especially, I always enjoyed.
Cool. And what about tools? How did you guys start to learn to use tools? Hand tools, power tools. You're using them all, right? Do you have favorites or favorite way to work? And how did you start learning to use them?
So I started by going to garage sales and buying inexpensive, beautiful boat building tools for $5 and acquired 2 canvas bags. Someone said, you need this, okay? And I think when I started out, my very favorite tools were my chisels and my bonker. I still have my first bonker. And that was just because I was using my hands. But when I ended and retired, without a doubt, my absolutely favorite tool was my wonderful table saw. I loved my table saw. I could build anything with the table saw. And so that shows a progression where I moved into power tools, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What about you, Julia?
Well, I think it was hand tools were probably where I started, and I figured if I could learn to do things very well with hand tools, the power tools just became a great assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, when I worked with John Gardner, his boat building class, he had everybody do everything with hand tools. I mean, we did the machine stuff to get the material out for the classes.
Mm-hmm.
But when he taught a planking thing, for instance, where they had to learn to spile and shape a plank, and they would take a really big board and they all took it down with draw knives to start with.
Wow.
And so I would come into the shop in the morning just waist deep in shavings because he had like 10 people in each class. But I thought it was a really neat thing because those people really understood what they were doing by the time they were done shaping those planks. And they did a pretty good job, actually.
Oh, yeah.
But so I started basically, the things that I liked the best. I figured I could do almost anything with, you'd have to have the material milled, but you could do pretty much everything with a bandsaw and hand tools.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And by hand tools, are you talking chisels, planers?
Chisels, planer, and draw knife. There are certain things that would kind of muscle off wood. And then after a while, as you get older, you realize, oh boy, it'd be really nice to have an electric plane here.
Yes.
Even Esther's laughing about that one. Esther, do you have a favorite tool, or how'd you get into the tool side of your work?
Yeah, tools. I don't know. It's been pretty, I guess I learned how to use the table saw first, really. Table saw and the circular saw. But as far as tools that I have and use now, I've just kind of accumulated them bit by bit, job by job as I needed them, I've collected a lot of tools over the last few years, but I remember when I started out asking people which tools should I definitely have, and I got a block plane, a drill kit or a drill set, chisels, you know, just some of the basics, but a lot of the tools that I have, I've just gotten when I needed them and then kept them in my kit, and your kit just gets bigger and bigger over time, you
All of a
know,
sudden you need
and
a Ford shop.
Yeah, right.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's nice working in a shop that has tools as a resource as well, for sure. I really enjoy using hand tools just because it's a little slower, more tactile, it's quieter. But one of my favorite things is using really sharp tools. So learning how to sharpen tools, well, it's such a different experience using a sharp plane or a sharp chisel versus a almost sharp chisel.
Mhm.
You know, so that's something that I really enjoy.
I look across the boatyard, and there are more women working in the trades now, and just by the nature of you three working in the yard, you know, and other women boat builders that are in the yard at this point, it's inspiring to see that. And yet still, you know, about 20%, up to 20% of the Northwest School of Wood and Boat Building students are now female. But when they're coming out and going into, they're not staying in the boat building trade. Some of them are tracking off into sail making or finishers and rigging, marine systems, things like that. How did you decide to stick with boat building, especially you, Julia, or Diana? How did you choose to stick to boat building? And once Esther gets back with us, I want to ask her this question too, over staying with boat building versus shifting into one of the specialty trades.
That's a good question. Gosh, sometimes I think I just do things because I don't know any better. And seriously, I loved my work. And when I started here in town, I had such amazing support from my coworkers and my boss when I worked for a company. And then when I went off on my own, I had great support from my customers and my associates. So I had really good support, emotional support. And I just continued to enjoy the work, right?
Mhm.
It made me want to get up in the morning. And I never thought I was very good at what I did, but apparently I had a market for it. And I just enjoyed it. And that's why I stuck with it, I guess.
Esther, what's motivated you to stay as wanting to be a boat builder versus shifting to systems or sail making or
Yeah, no,
another
there are
track?
plenty of options for sure. For me, it's really comes down to it's just what I enjoy doing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I like it. I like the work. I like working with wood. I've thought about trying out different careers, but I mean, you know how it goes. You pick one thing and you run with it, and you don't always know where you're going to end up. So this is where I am for now. I might end up somewhere else in a few years. Who knows? But
Well, and I know you own your own little wooden boat, so it's nice
yeah, that's right.
to
Yeah.
have all these skills under your belt to do the work on your own boat as well. Julia,
Sure,
how
yeah.
did you decide at a certain point to shift to, when I first, when I came to town 20 years ago, or especially in the last 10 to 15 years, I knew you more as a finisher, and as the best finisher, and you were training so many people. The boat building part wasn't as obvious. It wasn't up front and center as much. How did you make that shift?
Well, I think for me, the shift was largely financial, actually. When I had started in doing boat work, the pay was so low for somebody doing carpentry work. I really needed to be able to make a living for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I ended up, and the options were not that great where I was at the time. I was in California with basically nothing. And so the tools I could afford to have at that point in time were paintbrushes and a vacuum and sanding tools. And so I started a finish work business in California, and
Wow.
I did it there and got a very good reputation and tons of work. And I was quite well paid for what I did.
Right.
And then I moved to Port Townsend. And at that time I was with George, and we were building our own boat at home. So I was getting my satisfaction of doing boat construction work as part of our, the building of Zulu. And I just found work here and was able to get pretty much the same wage as I was getting in California. So it really did largely come down to financial issues, and what the options were at that time.
And you don't need a 40-foot shop to be a finisher.
No, you certainly don't.
Yeah.
You can do it and you can move with it,
Right.
which was really important to me. I could go anywhere with my little bag of
Right.
tools, and it was very little tooling to do it. And you just need the skills. And and when I say doing finish work, I was often doing little teeny repairs on pieces of wood that needed the finish done to them. So I continued doing a certain amount of woodworking as part of it anyway. And and I'd get in on projects. I just wanted to be part of boat projects, and it was a great way to do it.
Yeah.
And it was, to me, very satisfying. It was, the finished product was, made me happy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's nothing like that shine.
Nope.
Yeah.
And I really got, when I came to Port Townsend and started working, I got the best jobs. There was lots of lovely new wooden boats in Port Townsend, and I got work on all of them. It was great.
For longevity, do you have any advice or that you give to women who are in the trades, who are in boat building, especially, as far as sort of navigating this boat building versus other specialties, the back and forth?
Do it all. I mean, learn it all.
Yeah.
Because there's no reason you can't.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And you can jump. I mean, I've even thought, well, if I were to start doing something at this point in time, maybe I'd be interested in doing electrical work. It's relatively small stuff. I think I could do it well.
And you'd fit into those small
I'd
places.
fit in the small spaces. I'm still pretty nimble, so.
Actually, that's really good advice. And when I had my shop, that's essentially what I did was I called myself a full service shop. And if I couldn't do it, whoever could was right across the street or down the road or something. But in the years I had my shop, I did electrical and plumbing and systems and engine install and metalwork and rigging. And and that's what I was saying. It was so fun because every day was different and you learned so many pieces of the puzzle. It's all part of the whole.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, when we got to a point when George and I were building our boat and he was doing welding work and we were down to just little bits of stuff here and there. And I said, well, would you teach me how to wire splice? And so he taught me how to splice a wire. And I kept thinking, I'm not really strong enough to do this. But as Esther said, it's technique. And I learned how to do wire splicing and did the rigging wire on the boat, just spliced it all. It was fun.
Yeah, it is fun. It's all fun.
Julia, you and Diana both built boats with husbands, and I understand you met each other while you were in that project, in your individual projects back and swapped ideas on how to do that. Can you share some of those secrets or tips?
Ever worked on the same project together?
Yes, that's exactly it.
Yeah.
And we did it over a cup of coffee after just arguing over something.
Yeah.
And it was just the backbone. So it was early in the project.
You realized you couldn't work on the same project,
you
right?
just can't work on the same piece of wood.
That's right.
And that was that. And there was a joke for a long time as we were building our boat. We divided the shop in half and we were planking. And George planked one side, I planked the other.
Wow.
And
But it worked, didn't
And
it?
it worked.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and it was perfect for us. We did it different in that it was really cool because I was way behind in skills. So I was always trying to, assert myself. And so we would have staff meetings. Okay, this needs doing. So how would you do it? And I would say, well, I want to do the decking. And he'd say, okay, you do decking. And he'd say, how do you intend to do it? And I'd say, well, I want to do it this way. And he'd say, well, that's stupid. Do it this way. And I'd go, well, I heard what you said, but I'm doing it my way because we agreed I'm doing it. And he'd go, okay. And he totally respected me and backed off. Once we had our little staff meeting, and then whoever chose the project would go ahead and do it. And the other guy totally supported him. And it was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially the same with us. And we did, when we were doing the planking, we did help each other get install the planks, and you had to keep your mouth shut.
Oh, so there was a rule, keep your mouth shut. So Diana, I know you said that you all split up, like you did frames and he did planking, and you did the deck and he did something else. And then you did the boxes on deck, did you say? But he wanted to do one?
Right.
Or something like that?
It was really fun because, on a huge boat project, which this boat was 38-foot traditional, heavy constructed traditional wooden boat, there's a lot of jobs to do. And I had chosen the deck, which I absolutely love laying decks. That's one of my favorite jobs. He bunged the deck, right? And I bunged the hull, he planked. But I wanted to do all the houses, so there's an engine room, a fish hold, and a forecastle house. But he wanted to build a pallet house because he was a third generation commercial fisherman, Washington State commercial fisherman, and he'd been looking at pilot houses, Washington State pilot houses his whole life, and he wanted to build one. And this isn't at all it's not that kind of a pilot house, but it has a West Coast look to it, a commercial fishing West Coast look to it, and very handsome, I think. But he knew it was something he just had to do. And I was like, great. And he also wanted to do the horseshoe stern, which was important to him. And I was in charge of the plumb bow.
Wow.
Yeah, that's how and we worked well together. Right? We worked very well together.
Yeah, same with George and I.
Once we quit beating each other up.
Well, I love it that you all not only built those boats, but you voyaged in the ocean with them. And they're both still sailing today, those boats. So hats off to all of you. So, it's not just partner relationships and dating that are in this, but also our relationships with colleagues. How important is it to you, Esther, to be working, to have those good relationships with your colleagues versus you being able to go off and work independently?
Yeah, I mean, there's a bit of both, some of the work that we do is independent and sometimes you're working in a team, but it's absolutely important to have a good attitude and be able to get along with people. Those relationships that we build in the trades are oftentimes where our opportunities come from as far as recommendations or new jobs. And also just as far as how a crew works together on a job site, it makes all the difference in the world, whether people are being thoughtful of each other and having good attitudes versus if they're trying to undermine or bicker all the time, that kind of thing. So as far as relationships with the people you work with, having good ones creates a much better workplace culture for sure. It's really important.
What would you say about your colleagues in the yard and over the years in the different boat projects, Diana and Julia?
Oh man, I've been so fortunate. I've worked with so many amazing people. And of course, first it was just men, and then it did segue into women also. But the men loved working with me because, like I said, I wasn't always trying to date them, right? I was just there working. It was really straight. And but having a woman in the workplace, I could just see put a certain ease to the project. Everyone stood up straighter, swore less, except for me, and but yeah, I got so much support, I guess is what I want to say, from my colleagues in the shops I worked with, and then in the yard, and my customers as well,
It was the same for me,
Mhm.
really. I mean, it was wonderful.
Mhm.
It's a great experience. My favorite people are in the yard, really.
Still,
Still.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's, this, as we talk about relationships, there's kind of an elephant in the room that I just want to touch on briefly, and that's just the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace. Can you guys talk about how that's changed the whole issue, your relationships with people, and just your thoughts on that over, especially you and Diana and Julia, over the 50 years?
I mean, I literally didn't have any experience with it. I mean, it just never happened.
Yeah.
And I never actually felt like anybody told me that I couldn't do it because I was a woman or anything like that. So it was mostly just encouragement
From your colleagues.
from my colleagues.
Mhm.
And I
You can do it,
never,
yeah.
and I never had that experience of sexual harassment.
Mhm.
And I had very little of it, honestly.
Mhm.
In the beginning, like I said, when I came to town, I worked with these 3 guys in this one shop, and they were like my brothers,
Mhm.
and it just didn't happen. And I think part of it was because the whole shop was so supportive, right?
Mhm.
And so, but the few times it has happened to me, I've just had to stand up. Well, actually, Kaci, you were there once when you watched one of my customers come in. It was a woman, actually, and she was harassing me. And I just fired her, and it felt so great. And that's all you can do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You were there. You saw that.
Yeah. Any comments on that, Esther?
Oh man. I mean, I think every woman that's worked in a trade or a profession where maybe it's not the norm for women to be seen doing that, oftentimes will encounter surprise or skepticism from people who don't expect to see a woman doing that thing. I've been fortunate mostly to work in places that are welcoming to women, even if women weren't the majority of the people working there. So I've been fortunate that way in the cultures. I know it's not like that for everybody. But yeah, most of the things I've encountered are more along the lines of surprise that I'm doing what I'm doing, not so much disapproval or
Mhm.
not trying to make me not do it, just more so surprised that I would be doing it.
Mhm.
And that's actually one of the things that I enjoy about doing the work I do is I know we've talked about this in the past, but I enjoy being just one more woman visible working in a trade where people might not expect to see a woman working. I
Mhm.
think especially for younger women who are thinking about what their options are, that can be a powerful thing to see someone like them represented in a trade. That might change their idea of what's possible for themselves. So that's definitely something that I enjoy about it.
Well, one thing I've appreciated so much about having the conversation with you all about, our fellow, our people in our community, women and men, non-binary, is just that we are all trying very much to make it a safe workplace and inspiring and encouraging workplace, one where we're all supported. And I really appreciate your positivity about that, and you're just being able to just soldier on. Or as I heard you say once, you talked about firing that one, but I also know, Diana, that that's one of the reasons you started your own shop, was just to have that independence, be able to set your standards at your shop, how you wanted, and I think that's inspiring. As we think about the future of women in boat building, Esther, you've been so articulate in voicing your reasons for, pursuing the trades. And one of the things you said, really impressed me. And it was, I look forward to the day it's not a novelty anymore. And I think all of us feel that. What's one thing you wish women would do to improve their chances of success as a boat builder?
You know,
For me, one thing that comes to mind is to just not be held back by that feeling of being intimidated by something, and perhaps that's not a feeling that's unique to women, but I think a lot of women experience that, being intimidated to try something in a new workplace, or try a new tool, learn a new skill. And so anytime you want to learn and grow your skill, you have to push against that feeling of fear or intimidation in yourself and try anyway. I think that's the best place to start if you're looking to gain new skill.
Yeah, curiosity, I've realized, was a big part of what drove me. Was I was interested in learning everything. And as far as, I like what you said, Esther, not be intimidated, because it's so easy for us to get intimidated by changing the tire, right? Or something. It's so easy. And really, once you start doing it, you can accomplish it. So I don't know, maybe it's surround yourself with people who support you. Maybe that's the way to go, is to work with people who don't laugh at you or are surprised that you're trying to do something new. Just you're choosing to work with people that support you.
And also don't assume that other people are necessarily better or know more than you, because oftentimes, I don't know how many times I've just assumed that someone was more skilled than me, and I went to ask them a question, and then I found out, well, actually, I know more than they do, or I know more than I thought I did,
Yeah.
Yeah, Rick always called me Our Lady of the Assumption. And I make assumptions also.
Yeah.
So a last question I have here before we go to the audience questions. How could our community, all of us, not just here in Port Townsend, but worldwide, people, anybody that would watch this, how can all of us do more to support and further inspire women in boat building?
Well, I want to say this. It is true. We need more opportunities. Money talks, right? It's the people who have the money who choose who gets the jobs. And I mentioned this to someone recently. I've often heard it said that, well, most men own boats. I mean, most men own boats. Well, my experience in my life is that no, most boats are owned by a husband and a wife. Now, if that wife chooses to let the husband make all those decisions, that's their business. But what I guess I'm asking is for wives to start giving more jobs to the women. For example, early in my career here in town, there was a boat that came to town every year. Everyone wanted to work on it. It was just this gorgeous boat. And one year it came to town, and the wife said to the husband, I'm so tired of working with men. They don't treat me well. Can we work with Diana? And he went, oh, of course. Let's hire her. And then I had it every year from then on. Ernie Baird was upset because I got that job. But then we became best friends too. But all I'm saying is that was because the wife asked for it. And I'm just saying money talks. And I think women in our communities have an opportunity to help other women in this way.
Well, I can tell you, I would have never bought a wooden boat myself because I don't have the skills if it weren't for you all. And knowing that there were women in this community that could help me, that could work on the boat, and that would teach me and encourage me to learn along the way. So I definitely hear you there. And I do think it's been very special for me to work with you all as women boat builders, and to talk with you and see work, and to just feel the mutual support along the way. So I really appreciate all that you all have done. Do you have any other thoughts, Esther or Julia, about how the bigger community could support women more in the trades and inspire?
I can't really think of anything, sorry.
Yeah,
That's okay.
something good
I'm
to think
just
about.
seeing someone
Yeah.
like Esther working in the yard, that's encouragement. It just is.
Yeah.
And, I suppose when George and my boat went in the water, in town, it was a big darn deal. That's an encouragement to, there were
Yeah.
all kinds of people in there at the launching. Some of them were much younger, it just, some of I know one person came to me to learn finish work, and that was Ursula Swantner.
Oh, yeah.
And she ended up doing boat work, it's just, so I realized, that was an influence, just seeing that.
You mean you were an influence just by your presence?
By presence.
And your competence.
Yeah, and that would be, like I said, at this point, Esther's the one in the yard, so she's going to be influence people. She doesn't even realize it.
It's,
Big too.
Oh, I
and
know.
the
The
boat
boat
school.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're so grateful for the boat school because, well, that's how our yard got filled. I mean, almost
Mhm.
everyone down there went to boat school at one point.
Yeah, many. I mean, it's like the vast majority of people came through the, people running the businesses at this point.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to go off to Barb now and see if there are questions from the audience.
Yes, there are. There's quite a few questions about apprenticeships, actually. Andrew Stewart asks, what's the best way to bridge the gap between elders and the enthusiastic younger people?
So if you want to be an apprentice, the first thing you need to do is buy yourself a boat. You need to buy yourself a boat that needs
That's it.
repair, that isn't perfect, and hopefully a wooden boat. And to me, that was one of my biggest teachers was after I built Ocean, I ended up, you remember the boat I brought to town? It needed a little bit, and I learned so much on it. It was my teacher. And then through having this beautiful boat in the yard, working on it, elders, the Daubenbergers came by and would say, oh my God, people would come by and give me advice. And then when you're done, you end up with this beautiful yacht. That's a great way to become an apprentice. It truly is.
It's actually the best way. I have said that to people too. Buy yourself a boat.
Buy yourself a boat that needs some work.
Yeah.
Sandy Schaefer asks to the lofting experience. Lofting is absolutely daunting to me. What are the most challenging aspects of boat building for you to learn? Or maybe Esther?
Yeah, actually lofting is something I have yet to do much learning on. So I hope I get to learn more about that at some point. I didn't go to boat school, so there are certain things that I just haven't done yet because I haven't come across them in the jobs that I've been doing in the yard. But how you gain that knowledge is kind of a bit by bit, job by job kind of thing, so. Yeah.
What was the
Yeah,
hardest?
Diana, could you, Diana, could
something
you,
I'd like to learn more about.
sorry,
Could I what?
Diana, could you tell the story about how you learned to loft?
Oh yeah, well, it is embarrassing, but my whole life is an embarrassment. So the way I learned boat building mainly, I mean, I talked to people and people showed me how to use tools and stuff like that. My biggest education was walking the docks, going on boats, using boats, owning boats, but reading, right? So I got most of my information reading, and I had a couple of Bibles that I read, Chappelle, Color, and what was the other one? Oh yeah, Skeens. Those are my 3 Bibles. And the very first boat that I designed, it was a small skiff, but it was my first boat, red cedar. Everyone starts with red cedar skiffs, right? And I had to learn how to loft. So I read and read and read and read and read and read and read. And it just, I could get some of it, but I couldn't get it all. And then I thought, well, how important is that last line? I mean, really, how important? I knew overhead and I knew profile, but the other line, I mean, really, do you really need it? So I started laying it out, and by golly, you really did need that last line. And so I just kept reading until I finally it sunk in. And then I did understand lofting, but it took time, but I got it.
Sounds like it was a combination of reading, also doing the lofting on the drawings, and then applying it.
Right.
And then going back to those drawings again.
Reading, yeah. Reading more. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cap Suz asks, at what point in your progression did you move from a craftsman to an artisan and actually designing instead of following someone else's plan?
I could probably answer a little bit of that because we designed our own boat, and then part of it was there was not a boat that hit both George and I that we wanted to build, but there was one that was close, and it was called Islander, and it was sailed by Harry Pigeon. And so we started with a concept of that boat, but we didn't like hard chine boats, so we rounded the bilges.
Right, you made it yours.
We made it ours. And our whole technique, even in the construction of the boat, after lofting and on the stocks, we made changes. We raised the top sides a little bit because we realized we needed the internal space. So we called it an organic method of construction. And, we didn't design everything down to a T and then build it. And it's, the interior was done with that, with mocking up and seeing how things felt, and then building. And it was just a good way to do it.
Yeah. You found your way.
Yeah, you found our way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Tessa Hawkins asks, I'm interested in marine carpentry, as in building out the interior of a boat. Is it possible to focus on, or at least just begin there rather than building the entire boat?
Oh,
No, absolutely.
Why not?
It's easier. It's a whole lot easier.
You don't have to worry about the watertight integrity.
Yeah. Right. But you know what you need to do is learn how to take patterns.
Yes.
And that's a simple thing to learn. Anyone that's nice will teach you how to come to my house. I'll show you how to make patterns. And it just, you will become an expert so much faster.
Mm-hmm.
Christina asks, how many years training before you built your own boat? What style boat did you first build, and any lessons that you learned from the process?
So how long? Oh, I jumped right in. I had no background, no history, no experience. I just did it.
Same here.
I didn't do, I had the conversation with someone recently that you have to follow, you have to apprentice and you have to work and you have to do this. And then all of a sudden you're a shipwright. I just said, no, I'm just going to build. And actually my first boat was beautiful, but I wasn't under pressure of time or budget, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was my own project. But I would never let anything stand in your way. Just do it.
Mm-hmm.
Diana, is that the little dinghy that
Mhm.
James Close and Deborah bought?
Yeah, they ended up with it. Oh, which is funny because you ended up with their boat.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, the couple that owned the boat that Esther has now actually bought Diana's first dinghy.
Mhm.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he loved it.
Yeah.
So see, that's a vote of confidence right there.
Yeah.
So there's another question, are apprenticeships competitive? And I would add to that, are they easy to come by? I mean, does anybody do apprenticeships? Do you know of anybody actively taking on apprenticeships?
I don't either. I mean, you can volunteer on projects. I mean, I did that a long time ago, walk into a boat shop and say, hey, do you need a hand?
Mhm.
But that's kind of unusual in a situation where somebody's trying to earn money
Right.
building a boat, but it might be somebody doing their own project or,
Oh, there you go. Someone
Yeah.
doing your own project.
yeah, that needs a hand.
Actually, I took on some people doing that once. Some guy said, I'd like to donate some time to your project. And I went, you're kidding. Okay.
Yeah, I think as far as, you know, how to get into an apprenticeship, I haven't seen so much formal apprenticeships in this trade, but a lot of people learn on the job. A lot
Yeah.
of people come in with a little bit of skill and they end up doing other things and then picking up skill bit by bit. So that's one way to do it, is just start working entry level. You might end up painting bottoms for a long time before you learn other skills, but that's the way the work goes sometimes. And then if you want to really focus your time on just carpentry, you know, the boat school is a good place to go to pick up some of those basic skills and get a start.
And doesn't Adventurous run a big volunteer program when they were doing big refits and
Yeah, they did, and they still do. They still have work weekends where a lot of volunteers come and help with maintenance projects. So volunteering for something like that can be a great way to pick up a little bit of skill for more experienced crew or volunteers as well.
The schooner Martha has done that too, with a big cadre of volunteers, and you can learn little bits as you go. I was going to ask Esther, what would be the basic skills somebody needed to have to have been hired like you were as an apprentice at Haven Boat Works?
Oh man.
Did you need to know
skills.
how to use table saw and?
No, I did, but I was also taught a lot of that stuff. I came in knowing how to use some of those tools, but I think I learned safer and more effective ways to use those tools once I got here. I mean, a lot of that stuff you can learn pretty quickly, and it's better to learn how to do it right from people who know how to do it right than learn it wrong. You know, so I don't think not knowing how is necessarily a huge barrier when you're starting out, because you can learn and practice and gain that skill.
Yeah, it's interest as much as anything.
Yeah, interest and attitude, and
And I want to say something about that too, in that I've seen so many people in the yard who come in and they think they want to be boat builders, but they really don't. Because if they did, A, they'd buy a boat, right? They'd buy a boat. And B, on the weekends, they'd be working on their boat. They wouldn't have a girlfriend or a boyfriend. They wouldn't have children or a mortgage. They'd be, I mean, I'm kidding, of course. But the thing is, I rarely saw people coming into the business with the sickness, which I had. I had the sickness, right? Where I was so curious and so interested that I was always doing something, even if I was planning something. It just seemed like too many people came in and worked 9 to 5 and then went out and didn't think about boats until Monday morning, you know?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was a 7-day a week,
Right.
you know,
Yeah.
addict. I guess.
You had the sickness.
We have a question from Jake Beatty. What lessons can we learn from women breaking trail into the industry that can be applied for better inclusion of BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, people of color individuals?
I think it's just adopt the same attitude as anybody else. Just be interested and just get in there and go for it.
Yeah. Don't let people set your limitations for you, right? You know, just, I always was so stupid. I didn't realize it. Like I built a bulkhead once, I remember, on our boat, and I don't know how I did it. And Dave Hewlin came by that day and he went, "How did you do that? It's physically impossible." And I went, "I don't know, but I did it." And, you know, sometimes you just do things that you probably shouldn't even attempt. And the next thing you know, you succeed, you know?
I think something to keep in mind too is that even for those of us that have been on the receiving end of stereotypes, we can also sometimes harbor our own stereotypes towards other people. And so to keep the mentality of being welcoming and including towards different groups of people maybe new types of people you haven't worked with before who are interested in gaining that skill and coming into the trade and keeping an attitude of openness like that.
One thing I know with all of you is the generosity that you've received, you give. And that sort of, to anyone who did want to come in, who doesn't feel like the people that they're looking at look like them, just that to know that we're a community that is trying to do that, to invite people in and to help as we've been helped.
Jamie Bass says, currently working on my own fixer-upper sailboat in the PT yard. I'm between jobs, considering marine trades, but not ready to jump into boat school or expensive classes. Are there entry-level type jobs or volunteering to look out for around the yard? Something to get experience, network, and find out if it's for me.
I guess you walk into a boatyard and
Ask for a
ask
job.
for a job.
Yeah, ask for a
And
job.
maybe painting bottoms, just
Right.
like Esther said, and then they, you get to help on something because somebody needs an extra hand.
Right. Yeah. Ask for a job. Plenty of work in the yard. Oh my gosh. Have you noticed? We are burgeoned. It's
Yes.
wonderful.
A little love note from Ernie Baird. No questions, just admiration. I saw Esther's stem before it was installed. Absolutely beautiful work. I was chronically, painfully jealous of Diana's work on Duna and a lot of other jobs. Julia is a genuine master of her craft. It was a privilege to work alongside her, and Racket to take credit for her finish on boats that came out of my shop. Many thanks to all three for building in our community. That's lovely.
Thanks, Ernie.
Thanks, Ernie.
We love you too.
Kaci, I know at one point you had talked about maybe having Esther show us a little bit closer up of some of the work she's doing.
Yeah, if you can do that, since we have a little time.
Yeah.
Esther, can
do
you tell
that.
him a little bit about that boat and what you're doing to it?
Yeah. So this boat is getting new planks and frames.
It's about 50 feet, right?
So it's, yeah, a little less than that, but yeah,
Okay.
yeah, it's in the neighborhood. I'll see if I can pan down so you can see kind of the whole length of the boat here. The lighting's a little weird, but a lot of the hull is opened up right now. So the stem here just went in a couple days ago. And then I just started milling stock for frames today. So frames is going to be the next thing, and they're all going to be steam vent frames going in, white oak, and then planks after that. So it's going to be basically a brand new boat, which is pretty exciting. Fun project to work on.
And how many frames are you doing?
There's 44 frames per side.
Wow.
So quite a few.
What design is it, Esther?
It's a H.C. Hansen. It was built in the McCrary yard in Lake Union in the 30s.
Oh, cool.
Oh, it's a keeper.
Yeah, it's a cool boat.
Yeah, see if you can pan. Yeah, it's hard to see the
Yeah.
cabin. It's a motor vessel.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Let's see that stem. Let's see the stem.
Yeah,
Oh,
go.
yeah. Let's see if I can. There we go.
We'll have a jiggly
Yeah.
bit here for the end,
A little jiggly.
because that
Yeah.
is just beautiful. I wish I could show you all the picture I took of it when it was laying on the bench.
Question came in, where are good places to go at Boat Haven to get advice on working on your boat?
Ooh. That's a tough one. It depends on how busy the yards are.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
They're really busy. It's hard to get just advice. Yeah.
You're right. Yeah. You could hire someone.
Yeah.
Find someone. Shop around for whose expertise it is, the kind of boat you've got, and hire them for a bit of work. You know.
Or survey.
I think a lot of people are willing to kind of point you in the right direction too. You know, if you're not sure who to go to for a particular type of work, you know, a lot of people are willing to, you know, tell you what direction you should go or who you should talk to. There's a lot of different trades in the yard, so a few different shops.
I would encourage people to walk the docks as well. There are a lot of boat owners in town who either have done work on with some trades or have hauled out at some of the major boat shops in town. And depending on what it is you think you might need to have done, there are a lot of people willing to, boat owners in the marina that are be willing to talk with you as well.
Brayton Carter asks, what are the titles of the books you mentioned before that
Yeah.
inspired you?
Great. I pulled them out because I couldn't remember, but there was Skiffs and Schooners by Pete Culler, which was so valuable, and Boat Building by Howard Chappell, and Schemes, Elements of Design was so helpful for me for doing interiors, especially for me. It gives you how big your butt's supposed to be.
Oh, it's excellent.
It's perfect. It's a
Yeah.
great book. And then, and then the other book that I read constantly while we were building our boat was Sailing Alone Around the World by Josh Slocum, because it was a additional part of inspiration as to why we were doing it, right?
Mhm.
Those were my Bibles.
Esther, do you have different Bibles?
Oh, no, those are some of the same ones I've read. Not all of them, but a couple of those. Yeah. There was one that I really liked called How to Build a Wooden Boat, and I'm spacing on the author right now. Julia, you might know which one I'm talking about.
It might Bud McIntosh, would that
That's
be?
the
Oh,
one,
that sounds
yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's a great book too.
That is excellent, actually. That's because he gives you different options in some places as to how to approach something. And there was another one I was thinking of, Common Sense of Yacht Design, I think. Hershoff.
It's really inspirational to hear from women who have made boat building a career. I'm in my first year as a full-time boat builder in Maine after 2 years at the landing school. There is one other woman on our team who builds. I think it's so valuable to see someone who looks like you in the role, to be able to imagine yourself in a role. I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and no one suggested the trades to me as an option when I was a girl coming up. I was almost 40 before I fell in love with boats. Thanks so much for coordinating this, Taka. That's nice.
Yeah.
And then Ashlyn Brown, last minute question about the future of traditional boat building and how much is wooden boat building changing? Great question.
I want to talk about that, by golly. From the moment I came to town, people were saying wooden boat building is dead. Fiberglass boat building is the wave of the future. I mean, that's what got me into politics actually here in town. And a lot of people have said that recently wooden boat building is on its way out and will be taken over by other things, to which I say, I don't agree. If you look traditionally, just this year, at the 100 and 103 and 108-year-old boats that have come into the yard for a little putty and paint or a shampoo and set or whatever, maybe a major refit, but there are so many 100-year-old wooden boats that are being maintained by their owners because they understand the culture and the historical element of it, and how you can't build a boat like that anymore. You cut down a forest to build a boat like that. But if you maintain it, you can maintain wooden boats forever, right? If you keep them going. So I feel like they aren't a dying breed. That's what I want to say, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah, well, and when I very first started working, it was traditional wooden boats were on the way out.
Yeah.
And that was,
48
years ago
Yeah.
or something. So, I think it's just a matter of people's desire to keep it going, and, figuring out the materials that are available, and the materials are still available to some extent.
Yeah.
How about you, Esther? Do you have perspective on that?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, hopefully we won't run out of timber to cut down. That's one aspect for sure, is sustainability of the forests, because a lot of the wood that we use or prefer to use for building and repairing wood boats is old growth timber. So sustainability wise, that's definitely a perspective that needs to be considered. But yeah, we'll see. I hope it sticks around. I definitely enjoy this trade, and it's a lot of skill that's been passed down for generations, which makes it pretty special to preserve.
Well, I can actually address a little bit with, just to add to what Esther said. On the East Coast, you don't necessarily end up using perfect timber. And it's a matter of figuring out how to work with the timber you have.
Yep.
And we worked with a lot of very knotty material, and it was not necessarily first growth timber. That's ideal, but you still can build a boat with not ideal material.
Right.
It's just a matter of learning how to work with it.
And if you maintain a wooden boat, you really don't need, I mean, building boats is different, but if you maintain the fleet, you're not going to use that many.
Follow-up question too, are you seeing techniques change? Not that wooden boat building would die out.
One thing that surprises me is how many traditional methods are still the same. You know, a lot of the tools, the patterning methods, we use new materials and power tools. So some of that's changed, but a lot of the methods are really similar. You know, I've gotten to visit some older boat yards in different countries, different places, and they've been using the same kind of tools and methods for hundreds of years, and you can see a lot of similarities in what we still do today.
It's a great biz.
Yep.
All right, there's a lot of love coming through the chat, but it doesn't look like any more questions. A lot of appreciation for you guys.
I want to thank you guys for putting this on. It was really fun to sit together with Julia and Esther and Kaci. Thank you for, this was your idea, I believe. And Barb, thank you for making it happen.
Yes, I agree.
Thank
Well, I think it's this, just in summarizing this, I think that question at the end, you know, is that what's the future of wooden boats? And I think it's your competence, your craftsmanship, the way you inspire us as wooden boat owners, the skills that you all share and teach, and this thought that we could steward as opposed to just build new, that we could care for those trees and that have been cut down and made into wooden boats and repair. And all boats need maintenance eventually. And it's 12 to 15 fiberglass boats in the yard right now that need to be cut up and put into a landfill. It's not, you know, it's the wooden boats. It's a little more accessible for some of us to do work on them. And I'd rather sand, wood. That's, you know, my sailing career went backwards from ferro cement to fiberglass, steel to wood. And I can tell you the work you have to do on them is so much more pleasant on a wooden boat. So I am just so grateful for you three and all the other women who are working in the trades and in boat building around the world, and all the men and others who are supporting and encouraging people, teaching, and making this a priority. Thanks so much, Barb, for putting this together, for including us in the Ask an Expert series.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for being here. This was really special, really a great conversation.
Yeah.
Really appreciate you sharing all your heart with us, and it was a great, great night. Thank you all so much for joining us tonight.